Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Seekers of the Supernatural. I'll be your moderator tonight. My name is Tony Spera. We'll be talking to America's top Ghostbusters, Ed and Lorraine Warren. They've been involved in supernatural research, paranormal, and supernatural research for over 40 years. We'd like to present tonight's show with an introduction of the Warrens, so we'd like to start first with you, Ed, if we could. I'd like to ask you, especially, how did you get involved in the area of the supernatural and haunted houses?
Well, Tony, it came about because of the fact that I lived in a haunted house as a boy from 5 until 12. My father, who was a police officer at that time, was kind of a strict guy, but he was a very fair man. And he'd always say to me, Ed, there's a logical reason for everything that happens in this house. But when I was lying in bed there as a young kid, and that closet door would open up at night, it would wake me up. I'd look in there and see a large globule-like ball, and then a face of an elderly lady in that ball. That's a ghost light. And she wasn't looking pleasant, Tony. Next thing, it would come out of that closet toward my bed. I'd hear footsteps. I would feel this icy coldness in the room and heavy breathing. And I'm thinking to myself, there's a logical reason for all of this. But somehow, by the time I thought that, I was halfway to my parents' bedroom.
Oh, boy.
So that's how it all started, all these here experiences that I had as a boy.
So you've been doing this for well over 40 years.
Yeah, 40 long years throughout the United States, Canada, Mexico, into Europe. Spent a lot of time in Great Britain and Scotland.
Wow. As Catholics, Ed, you and your wife both are Catholic. How did this work coincide with your religious beliefs?
Well, it goes right along with it because, you know, Catholicism is based on a supernatural world, as every great religion is. Open up the Bible, and it's full of psychic words such as spirits, ghosts, apparitions, levitations. So, you know, as a boy going to a parochial school, I would ask the nuns and the priests, what is this about ghosts, the supernatural? Is it for real? Are there really devils? And of course, you know, Catholicism teaches us that these things are real. So I based all of my beliefs on that, and I still do today. When I go into a home, I'm not looking for devils. I'm not looking for ghosts. What I'm looking for is a natural explanation as to what's going on. Something physical in the house. Only when I find that there is something supernatural, something paranormal, do I accept it. And that has to be proven to me 100%. I have to see a table moving across the room. I have to hear those spirit voices. I have to see the ghost. People like Lorraine here who are clairvoyants, they have to tell me what's there because I do not have the sixth sense as they do.
So in other words, Ed, what you're saying is that you act more like an investigator, a skeptic investigator?
Right. Investigators, we're sort of like the police department of the supernatural world. We find out what's going in there and then we try to rectify it. If it's a human spirit who's causing the problem, this is easy to take care of. If it's something inhuman, something diabolical, then we have to go in for the big guns. We have to go to the religious beliefs of Catholicism, Protestantism, Mohammedanism, all of these. And you know, it's not just the Catholic priests that we work with. We work with rabbis, we work with ministers of all faiths. We're very ecumenical in our thinking.
Now, Lorraine, Ed had said, and I know this from personal experience also, that you are a clairvoyant also. Can you tell me, Lorraine, the first time that you knew, or was it just from birth? How did you know that you were clairvoyant?
No, it started, Tony, when I was probably about 9 years old, when I first had experiences where I could see lights around people. But the lights that I could see around people, I thought everybody could see that. I didn't know anything about the human aura, and it started from that point where I would see that. Now, I had nobody to share that with. I was brought up in a private Catholic school, and you couldn't share things like that with the nuns.
I wouldn't think you could.
No, that was very much frowned upon. And if I tried at home, although I was brought up in a very loving Irish Catholic home, it was fine as long as it was like a joke and lighthearted. But if it was never anything to be discussed seriously. So it was really as a young adult when I met Ed that I began to do.
That
That was your lucky day.
That's when her ghostly life started.
In my ghostly life. See, most of our courtship, Tony, we were kids, and it was through mail because Ed entered the service soon after we met, and we were married while he was still in service, and our daughter was born while he was still in active duty. So It was when he came home from the service, really, and one of the first homes that I ever went in. And that was not easy for me because my Catholic faith was very important to me, and I kind of frowned on things about Ed telling me about haunted houses because that just did not fit in. As far as I was brought up to believe, when you died, you either went to a purgatory state or you went to heaven. But you were definitely with the oneness with God.
Or you went someplace else.
Yes, but I didn't like to think about things like that. But I didn't know about hauntings because I was never connected what I felt and experienced to haunted homes or any role that I could play. But Tony, the very first home that I ever experienced psychic phenomena in was the Ocean-Born Mary House, the painting that's right there in front of you. And that home was in Henniker, New Hampshire. And it was in that home, I was at that time maybe about 20, 21 years old, and I had my first out-of-the-body.
That was young, you know, 20, 21 years.
That was
we thought we were pretty
young.
old then.
Yeah, we did. Well, we thought we knew what it was all about. But you know, Tony, you asked about Catholicism before, and I think our work has greatly enhanced our faith, truthfully.
Now, you spoke earlier, Lorraine, when you were speaking of your clairvoyance about a person's aura. Can you explain to us, to the audience, what the human aura is?
The aura is the supernatural glow that emanates from our physical body, and it depicts our personality, our health, and our spiritual well-being. Now, there are many things that alter this, many things in our life. Our emotions, any type of drugs, mind-altering drugs, will affect the aura. In fact, it's upsetting to me to see how much the aura is affected by people taking mind-altering drugs, because what it's affecting is almost every aspect of their well-being, from their spiritual to their emotional to their health.
I just wanted to add something to that, Tony. You know, we're talking about drugs here. Lorraine says it alters their conscious awareness.
Yes.
It really does. But people would think immediately, in other words, they're hallucinating. They don't really see what's there. The fact is they do see what's there, because now they are in the same state of consciousness as Lorraine is, as a medium, as a clairvoyant. These drugs will alter that to the extent that they can't see clairvisually and hear clairaudiently, which can be very frightening.
Now that is what, Tony, the spirit sees. The spirit doesn't see me as a woman, you as a man, or Ed. The spirit sees the aura, and like attracts like, and that's how spirits
They're attracted to that aura, like a moth is attracted to a flame. Like attracts like, as she said. You know, if you're a person of a positive nature, you attract positive spirits. Negative, you attract the diabolical or the evil.
Right. Now, Lorraine, you talked about the clairvoyance like we spoke about, but is everyone clairvoyant to some degree?
Yes, they are, Tony.
Okay.
But most of us don't use that psychic ability. But every one of us have experiences. When the phone rings and you know who's on the other end of that phone, well, this is how that would come about. You're going to make a phone call, say within another 5 minutes. You're thinking about that person, you're thinking about what you're going to say, and you telepathically project that message before you ever pick up the telephone.
I think a good way to relate to this is a salesperson.
Yes.
Salespeople are constantly using their clairvoyance, their ESP. You know, they're projecting themselves to that client, and they want to sell that client something. So, you know, they have to pick up their vibrations, and you know the old saying, you have to sell yourself before you can sell your product. Well, that's what the salesman does. Same thing.
But now the three of us are used to working and being with people. So you and Ed would certainly have a certain amount of psychic ability or clairvoyance. But mine has developed. I've never tried to develop it, remember. It's developed because of what I've exposed myself to. So today, I use it for discerning in haunted homes. I use it for my work with police or things of that nature.
For those in the audience who don't know, I've worked with you
Oh, yes.
guys for many years.
Many years.
We've been to many locations together, to
Right.
many haunted houses
You'll never
together.
forget your experience at Whitby Abbey now, will you?
I'll never forget that. I'll never forget my experience
That
with
was
Whitby
quite
Abbey.
frightening, which we will get into at another program later on.
Yes.
Right now, probably they're wondering out there, how do you get to be a demonologist? Well, I remember on a plane one time, a lady said to me, what do you do for a living? I said, well, and I looked at her kind of funny. I said, you'll never believe it. I said, I'm a religious demonologist. Oh, you fill out prescriptions, is that?
Fill out
Is
prescriptions.
that it? I said, yes, ma'am, that's right.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, you guys really, really are, well, they're Connecticut's own. I should mention also for those in the audience who don't know, they are Connecticut's own homegrown Ghostbusters right in our area. You folks do live in Monroe and have lived there for how long, Ed?
38 years.
38 years,
38
just in
years.
Monroe. And of course, we were born and brought up in Connecticut. So that, you know, our travels have taken us as far away as Australia, you know, to haunted areas all over Europe, Great Britain, Mexico, Canada. You name it, Tony, we've been there and we've hunted them down.
So in the past, we'll say 40 years or so, you've
A lot of
been
ghosts.
around the world. You've been to, I understand, Australia, to England and Scotland, I know,
All
of
over.
course.
A lot.
You also even find time to teach classes in the paranormal,
Oh, yes.
We love
which
that.
you do even to this day, right in this
we
area.
love that. That is
People
something
will
we
say
love.
to us,
That.
who's going to take over after you people go? Well, we're not going anywhere. We're going to be right here, but we will be instructing them, and people like yourself, Tony.
Well, I
Yes.
appreciate that.
Yes, but I think that's the most important thing anyone can do with the knowledge they've gained, is to share it, and that's what we do through teaching.
I think our viewers out there are going to be shocked when they find out how many hauntings, how many homes have been saturated with the supernatural right in this area. You know, I'm talking about
Are there many?
Connecticut.
Are there many in,
Oh,
like, for
Connecticut,
instance,
Massachusetts.
For instance, let's just take Newtown, for instance.
Newtown.
Are there,
I call that the village of 7 haunted houses. Now it's the village of 8 haunted houses because we have another one. But, you know, see, people say, where's the most haunted areas in the United States? It would be New England. New England is the oldest area. They have the biggest population right now. We have the oldest homes. Tragedies create the ghost syndrome. An older house has more of a chance of a tragedy occurring in it. And how many people have bought homes, these old houses, and even new ones sometime, and they live there for a week, and all of a sudden they start hearing the footsteps, the heavy breathing, the doors opening and closing, the lights going on and off. Well, who do you call? A plumber, electrician, carpenter? Sure. That's thinking logically. But then when they can't help you, who do you call then, Tony?
Ghostbusters.
You got it.
Now, is it the people that live in the house, are they
Yes.
causing the phenomena to happen? In other words,
No, they're not causing it.
they move into a house. The house becomes haunted. Phenomena starts to happen. But the previous owners had no problem. So is it that something's attracted to them?
It could be because 100 families could move into an Amityville horror house. Nothing would happen. But certain people move into that house, and it's like taking a battery, putting it into a flashlight, and there's a connection. Like attracts like. Evil spirits who haunt houses do not like happy homes. They do not like happy families, so they leave. They go where there's a lot of antagonism, a lot of arguments, violence. This is what they thrive on.
Speaking of the Amityville, you just brought up Amityville horror. Was that a really bad case in your estimation?
Amityville horror on a scale of 1 to 10 would be a 12. Now we're not backing up the book and we're not backing up the movie. Get that straight. We were there. We know what happened to the Lutz family. We know what happened to us. That was a horrifying case. And if they had portrayed it exactly as it happened with the Lutzes, who were driven out of there 28 days after they moved in, it was much more terrifying than what the book or the movie even showed.
You know what I think would be great to do, Tony? We ought to devote a program just to that. We ought to have one of our programs here where they would see the only photographs ever taken in that home while the Lutzes still owned the house, while their belongings were still intact.
A lot of people don't realize that what they call the Amityville horror actually followed Lorraine and I home. We're about 75 miles from Amityville, but that thing followed us home one night, and we'll be going over those terrifying experiences with the people when we bring those photographs back here and show them that were actually taken in that house during the investigations and while the Lutzes lived there.
And two of them are of a psychic nature.
Wow.
Yeah, so that will
Okay,
be real.
closer. Let's go closer to home. For instance, in Newtown, Monroe, is there any case outstanding that you could remember in your estimation,
my
in
God,
recent
yes.
memory, that would really be something that we should talk about?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about the Bell
The
home.
Bell home would be a
Yeah.
very interesting home. This was Marie Bell, who was a policewoman right here in Newtown, and her dad was a police officer. The grandfather, Richard Jeremiah Stanton, was an imposing figure. He stood 6'7". He ran away from home when he was 13 years old, went on a whaling ship, eventually came to Stratford, Connecticut, came ashore. As they say, he put an oar on his shoulder, and when somebody asked him, "What's that for?" that's where he stopped. And he built a home right here in Newtown with his son, Wes. And he said, "This house will always be a port in a storm for my family. Anybody tries to move into this house, I will haunt them." Well, he lived to be 98 years old. The man died, of course. And Marie Bell decided that she was going to move up to Bethlehem, New Hampshire, start a new career, a new life with her kids. Before she was to move out, all the crockery in the pantry started smashing and breaking. Things were toppling over. Knives were flying out of nowhere, hitting into doors. They heard crashing sounds. We were called in by Westcon College over here in Danbury. One of the professors had asked us to go to the house. We went there. We interviewed the family, and during the communication, this man actually showed up in spirit. We have a picture of that, which we'll be showing at a future date.
That was
And Lorraine had
fascinating.
communication, which was amazing.
Yeah, that would be fascinating to talk about how, you know, he...
Can you tell us, Lorraine, a little bit about that communication that you had?
Oh, that was really, really unusual. For one thing, I knew nothing about the stature of this man. And Tony, I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and there were quite a few people there. Remember, they had a large family of grown girls. And so we're all sitting there, and I began to see this man. So that I had to really look right up in the air at him. He was, you know, that tall.
White
a
hair,
figure.
beard.
And then Ed would keep asking through me, tell him to prove that that's really him. And he took me to a location. It was on Queen Street, which is just behind where the house stands even today. And it had a cinder driveway, and it had a bouquet on the door, which was an indication of a funeral. And then he said, the condolence cards that will prove what I'm telling you are in a shoebox.
She asked for proof that it was him. He told us to go up to the attic on the 3rd floor, go into a closet, and up on the top shelf there would be a shoebox.
It was a rafter. It
Yeah.
was a rafter. I mean, something that they had never even gone into, and was a shoebox. And it was full of all the condolence things.
His obituary, everything.
Now,
That's
they
wild.
photographed me during it. Now, Tony, I had had an accident on 84 with a reporter, this reporter and I, and precognitively, which is the ability to see ahead in things that are going to happen, I knew this was going to happen to me. And I had this accident, and this was the first home that I communicated in following that accident, which would greatly heighten my awareness, or anyone's psychic awareness. And when they photographed me during it, his image showed up right here
over
next
her.
to me.
Wow.
But the most important thing about this case is the fact that we had so many witnesses, eyewitnesses to the things occurring. I went in with one of our investigators one day, and there was a brass ashtray which belonged to Mr. Stanton. That was his favorite ashtray. That thing took off the mantle and flew across the room, smashed into a picture. This thing would sail around like it was a flying saucer or something, smashing windows, breaking pictures. The spirit of Richard Jeremiah Stanton was definitely annoyed. And after the Bell family moved out of there, I understand that it even followed them up to Bethlehem, New Hampshire.
In the car.
In the car, they could hear his voice ranting and raving. Now, when you hear a voice like that, you could hear it two ways. Telepathically, which would be through telekinesis, or a materialized larynx. Now, many people had heard the voice of Richard Stanton, And his wife had said, this is him, there's no doubt about it. He's the type of man that would bring about this kind of phenomena in a house like it's happening right here. This is my house. I always wanted to be a port in a storm for my family.
Which was a
and
statement
if anybody
he had
else
made.
tries to move in, I will haunt them.
Yes, he made that statement.
Can you explain, Ed? You brought up a word maybe our audience isn't aware of, and what exactly it means, telekinesis?
Well, if you look into an occult dictionary, you're going to get a little confused. Because telekinesis or telekinesis would be said to be the movement of objects. It is not. It is telepathic sound that is projected to an article that could actually explode it, or it's telepathic sound that you picked up. Psychokinesis or psychokinesis is the movement of objects. Okay. So there's a little confusion there.
There's a little bit of difference there that people don't think there is.
And it was Dr. Ryan from Duke University who first coined that phrase, which was telekinesis, when he walked into a house and a telephone just exploded right before his very eyes. And he was the first one to really come out with that wording.
What would you, Lorraine and Ed, say to people who say to you, prove to me that there's an afterlife? I don't believe there's an afterlife.
You come with me, I'd say to them, and I'll prove it to you. If there's a skeptic out there listening right now, I don't mind skeptics. You know, that means they're open-minded. But show me a closed-minded atheist. Show me a person who says this can't be, and I say, put up your money or shut your mouth, because I'll prove it. In a court of law, Lorraine and I went in Rockville, Connecticut, and we proved that a woman was driven out of her house by ghosts and her son. We won the case. We set a precedent in the United States. There's nobody listening to us right now, looking at us right now, that can prove there's no supernatural world. But we can prove that there is through our evidence, everything that we're about.
But also, let me say this, Tony, where haunting phenomena is concerned, the individual who has haunting phenomena, true haunting phenomena, taking place in their home, they may be atheists at the time, but we have never really met a true atheist in a haunted home.
There are no atheists in truly haunted houses, because the first thing that they want to know, Tony, is, hey, what do we do about this? Call in an electrician, a plumber? No. You got to get somebody who's connected with a supernatural world, a rabbi, a priest, a minister. These are the people that can help you through the prayers and asking for the intervention of angelic spirits.
Now, I think on further shows we'll be speaking about something that I was personally involved in, and a lot of people that I know. And that's the Eastern Graveyard, what's known as Union Cemetery.
Yes.
How haunted is Union Graveyard?
Very
Probably
haunted.
the most haunted graveyard I know
You want
of.
proof of the supernatural? Take your camera, go to the Union Graveyard after 9 o'clock at night, but don't go inside of it, because you are not allowed to go in there. You can take your pictures from outside the stone wall, and you can get some fantastic photographs.
The iron fence.
You will get ghost globules, electromagnetic energy, which we will be showing photographs in our next program.
So that's probably one of the most haunted locations around here.
Oh, yes.
It is.
There's
and don't
so
forget
many
Dudley Town, the
witnesses.
cursed village.
Yeah, Lorraine or Ed, whoever would like to address this. The village known as Dudleytown,
Right.
the cursed village in Cornwall. I've gotten millions of people asking me about it. But you guys, I know a lot more about it than I do. Can you explain what exactly Dudleytown is?
Yeah, Dudley Town is an area that has an aura of disaster about it. Did you ever see a store open up? It has everything going for it. A lot of people going by, cars going by, they've got good products, but they close down. Another business goes in, it closes down. And it keeps on and keeps on, an aura of disaster. I knew a restaurant like that time, must have been owned by 12 people. I finally told them one day, get the grounds consecrated, get the store blessed. And from that time on, it was a success.
So
That's the same with Dudleytown.
So Dudleytown, when was the village first, incorporated? Was it a regular village? Was it
Early 1600s. It was founded by the Dudley brothers, who were coming back from the French and Indian Wars, seen this tract of land, liked it, and bought a parcel of it and started Dudleytown.
And all these tragedies have
But it's
occurred.
still haunted today, Tony.
Oh, yeah.
It's still haunted. You know, I get so many calls from people like scouting groups and school groups, and their leaders are taking them up there for overnight sessions. I really don't advocate that at all. I mean, they're taking them to a haunted location, and realize that phenomena of this nature may not happen at that given time while they are there. It affects you on your weakest, most vulnerable level, and it affects you when it wants to affect you. So bringing somebody and subjecting them to that, especially young people, they could be affected by it later after leaving there.
Well, they could be, but it doesn't mean they're going to be.
No, I'm not saying they're going to be, but they
To give you an
could.
example, you know, some years ago, we went up there with Channel 3 out of Hartford. They brought 2 brand new trucks up there worth $250,000 apiece. And a young lady who was to interview us when we got down by the old church foundation there. Well, by the time we got to the church foundation, the 2 generators and the trucks went dead. And the girl became quite ill. They had to take her out of there.
Let me ask you this question, Ed. If someone has a problem, they think their house perhaps is haunted. They're hearing sounds. They've called the plumber, for instance. They've called the electrician, the plumber, and they need help. They think their house is haunted. Is there a way that they could contact you?
Yes, they can contact us through our post office box. Anybody that has any questions at all, Tony, regarding our work can contact us through writing to the Warrens, Post Office Box 41, Monroe, Connecticut, 06468.
And keep in mind that, you know, it's not just Lorraine and I that work in this field, as you know, Tony. We have numerous investigators that give of their time, dip into their own pockets, you know, to go to these areas and to help these people.
Yes.
Well, it's been a very interesting show, and I understand and I know that next week what we'll be doing is seeing some very fascinating ghost pictures,
Oh, yeah.
psychic photographs. We're going to have an excellent program next week. We'll have slides. We'll show that. For Ed and Lorraine Warren, this is Tony Spera. Thank you, and good night.
Hasta pronto.